So the big question that we're asking is the killing of Shujat Bukhari and the recent spate of violence a bid to silence saner voices and derail the peace process in Kashmir? To talk about that, we have with us Alok Bansal, security expert. Welcome, Mr. Bansal, to Newsnight. So there has been all-round condemnation on the attack on Shujat Bukhari, and we are seeing it, condemnation coming in that is from across the political spectrum there, from fellow journalists and from the common man also. We saw a huge turnout in the funeral procession as well. What intent do you see behind this attack?
See, Shujat Bukhari was a renowned journalist, an independent voice which was heard with rapt attention by most people in Kashmir Valley. And he was a liberal, and he had been questioning the motives of various youth participating and supporting militants of late. And I think militants have never been very happy with any voice of moderation, any liberal voice, or anybody who could probably negotiate subsequently. And as a result, he has been eliminated. Now, this shows very categorically that the militants have no faith. They don't want to keep anybody who can propound an alternate viewpoint. And we need to look at it in the context that the government had declared a unilateral ceasefire, taking into cognizance the holy month of Ramadan. And despite that, which was the fact that the ceasefire was welcomed by the local population in Kashmir, the militants have indulged in acts of terror. They have eliminated people, thereby showing that they have utter disdain for the sacred or the holy month of Ramadan. And
is it then fair to say that this is an attack, one, on the freedom of the press? This is an attempt to silence a sane voice of reason, an independent voice in the Kashmir, and silence a person who was working for peace in the valley. Besides that, is it also an attempt to undermine the peace process?
See, there is no doubt that Shujat Bukhari was working for peace. He was a man of peace, and he would have actually moved forward. Since journalists and press highlight the truth, and truth is often not acceptable to the militants, they have been targeting such people. In the past also, journalists have been targeted, and this is again an attempt to silence anybody who's talking sense. And this is unfortunate thing. It's a setback to some extent, because government has said that they are willing to negotiate, we are willing to do anything within the framework of the constitution. And the people who could have mediated, who could have taken the talks forward, are being eliminated. I think Shujat Bukhari was one of those people who was respected. The very fact that you saw Mehbooba Mufti, you saw Omar Abdullah, you saw BJP leaders participate in his funeral shows how widely he was respected, cutting across political divide. Now, such people, elimination of such people, I think the main reason is that the militants have been targeting anybody who has voiced moderation. If you go back, far back, Abdul Ghani Lone, etc. were killed up. And subsequently, anybody in Kashmir who has talked sense, who has actually talked in terms of moderation.
So is the attempt then to strike terror in the hearts of the people of Kashmir, to strike terror in the hearts of those people who are moderate voices in the valley, and perhaps also to bring a Talibanized culture in Kashmir society? We've seen in the past how Asia Andrabi has spoken about shutting down beauty parlors, and the society then had rejected that idea. Is it an attempt to take Kashmir back to the 1979 period, when the sister of Mehbooba Mufti was abducted, when Chirag Sharif was burnt? In fact,
it's an attempt to take Kashmir back to medieval ages. There is no doubt in my mind that radicalization is sweeping through. There is a wave of radicalization, though majority of the Kashmiris are still not accepting this sort of a viewpoint. But there is a serious attempt being made to radicalize the society. Many people don't believe it, but there is a radicalization which is growing in Kashmir. And what we are seeing, the current spate of terrorism, is nothing but a manifestation of these radical viewpoints. And what you said, Asia Andrabi saying or something, what the militants have been, statements that the militants have been issuing, are actually a step in that direction. We also need to understand that when the unilateral ceasefire was declared, it was widely welcomed by the populace of Kashmir. Now, this has actually unnerved both the terrorists and their handlers across the border and line of control.
And according to some data also which we have, the number of stone pelting incidents went down in the first 16 days of Ramzan this year compared to last year. And there are also reports that this one has been more successful than the ceasefire that lasted several days. It went into really months in 2000 when such unilateral ceasefire was announced.
Undoubtedly, it was very successful and it was widely welcomed by the local population in Kashmir, and that is what unnerved the terrorists, because they are not interested in bringing back peace. If peace returns to the valley, it actually defeats their own purpose, and more so as far as their handlers across the line of control or international border are concerned. They were not very comfortable with peace returning to Kashmir Valley. And what is important is that the way they have indulged in wanton violence in this holy month of Ramadan shows that they have no faith, no religion. They don't believe in it, because this unilateral ceasefire was actually brought into force only to give the population some respite, because taking into cognizance their sensitivities as far as the holy month of Ramadan is concerned, because it's very clearly laid down that there should be no conflict initiated during this holy month and things like that. But the way they have gone about it shows that they have no respect, no cognizance of these religious edicts or religious sermons.
The terror handlers in Pakistan want to keep the tap of terror on beyond doubt, but besides that, we've also seen Aurangzeb, the army man, being martyred. He belongs to J&K and he was proceeding on leave for Eid to be with his family, and he was abducted and his bullet-ridden body was found in Pulwama yesterday. The last rites have been conducted, I understand, and the army, of course, paid its heartfelt tributes to him. But you know, we've seen such attacks on unarmed security personnel, including J&K policemen in the past. DSP Ayub Pandit's example is there, and that happened during Ramzan last year. Is there a need, considering these attacks, for a review of the counterterrorism strategy? How is it that we can protect our men better?
See, firstly, we must say that this is actually a very, very ghastly act. The auspicious occasion of Eid, when that soldier Aurangzeb was actually traveling to Punch, where he was a native of, was brutally kidnapped, and then he was brutally assassinated. The way his bullet-ridden body was found, it's extremely sad. We were seeing the scenes of his funeral. In fact, we could see the BJP state president Ravindra Rana actually consoling his next of kin. So this is something, and you can see the amount of crowd that the people are with the martyrs. They are not with the terrorists. In fact, the population of Punch, as you could see, that there was a widespread participation. But I feel that this so-called ceasefire, which the government was considering to extend beyond Eid, may now be under pressure, because what we have seen is that while the population in general has widely welcomed the ceasefire, but the ceasefire has actually allowed the militants to plan and carry out this sort of pointed attacks. Now what is going to happen is that I think before the ceasefire, the militants were under pressure, and I think the security forces will probably go on the offensive again.
But from the government's perspective, if you see this cessation of hostilities, then the government would have just wanted to give peace a chance there, because you know, why should the government be criticized only for dealing with the situation with an iron hand? And during the holy month of Ramzan, this is a confidence building measure for the people of Kashmir.
Undoubtedly, it was actually, and as I said, this was taking into account the sensitivities of the people to provide them succor, taking into account the religious sensitivities, considering what the religion says, that Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, is not for hostilities, and that's why government went out of its way. At a time when militants were on the back foot, we provided them with that sort of a succor. But the way militants have acted, the way terrorists have acted, has indicated that they are not people of religion. They have no faith, they have no belief in any religion. The way they have gone about indulging in this sort of senseless violence shows that they have no respect for this holy month of Ramadan. And I think, having done so, now I think government may have to reconsider extending the ceasefire beyond Eid, as I could see.
Okay, that call is yet to be taken and announced by the government. But thank you, Mr. Bansal, for having joined us in News Night tonight.